Just before we start the webinar, today's webinar is sponsored by SPJMR GMP and University of South Florida. SPJMR GMP and University of South Florida offers MS program in analytics in USA. There are very good scholarships offered as a part of this particular program. My name is Milind Kamath. I'm your host today for this webinar. And with me, I have a very distinguished professor from University of South Florida, who is expert in finance, fintech, blockchain, AI, and of course, very well-known figure with respect to large language models and ChatGPT. So today we have decided to do a very interesting conversation and how to prepare for competitive exams, specifically the quantitative section. That is what we will do. Before I hand over to Professor Kiran with his opening remarks, as usual, make sure that before he gives your viewpoints, if you have any questions, put it on the chat window. I will moderate the chat window for the Q&A post his briefing is over. In the second half, I also have questions which were registered by the participants who may join or may see the webinar offline. So I will try to answer them during the second half of this session. So before I start the conversation, I will just want to have some brief overview, Kiran, from you regarding ChatGPT and how it can help in the competitive exams. So if you can give the briefing first, so we will have some Q&A and then you can demonstrate the task. So Professor Kiran, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me to this very exciting topic. So I've been dealing with, these kinds of, situations, large language models and how to use that very effectively in various types of situations. And I know the competitive exams are going to be a huge amount of interest because they're so prevalent. I myself have gone through, a lot of competitive exams myself, the GREs, the TOEFLs, and, all this stuff. So I kind of know how to, prepare for those, but I used to do this on my own many, many years ago. Now we have a bunch of different tools that are available to us. Even from the beginning, we had several avenues open to us, right? So there were practice exams. So, when I was doing my GRE practice, I could go there and buy books, on bookshops and buy all these things and look at them. There wasn't a whole lot of material available in those days. I mean, I'm talking like 3 decades ago, okay, or almost 4 now. So, but since then, we've had all these tutorials and, colleges come up. There are independent tutorials and people who will teach how to ace these exams and so on. And now, of course, we have the web, we have the Stack Exchange, we have the Google. You can search for all these different things, right? There are online exams, online practice sessions. All of this stuff is available. But the latest one is the large language models and the ChatGPTs and all the other things, related things, right? So the question, of course, is how can we better make use of all of this? And I will show you some really fascinating things that you can do with this one. But hopefully, this will help you get some really interesting strategies on how to use ChatGPT to augment your GMAT training study skills.
So one question, Professor Kiran, before you delve into the task. Generally, as you rightly mentioned, coaching classes, tutorials, people attend and there are one-to-many. So that same particular exercises has been given to many students, and that is what the coaching class works.
Yeah.
And here is the phenomena which can act as your personal assistant with highly personalized. I would like to have your viewpoint on that first for the participants who are attending today. Because it's a personal assistant and there is a slight difference between that tutorial and the way this chatbot can be used to personalize the learning.
Absolutely. One of the, I was actually a co-founder for a very early startup, several years ago. in the education field, and we actually built AI-based education that will personalize it for that one particular individual. And not only that, it will adapt itself as the person learns and their skills actually change. The software also adapts itself, right? So today we have almost the same thing in a slightly different form. If you take ChatGPT, if you go to a coaching school, for example, you'll get personalized attention. That's great, that's fine. But it's a large body of people, right? You've got 20 or 30 other students in that same thing, and they all get the same stuff. So how much attention can a human tutor pay to you versus taking something like ChatGPT and completely customizing it for your own sake, right? ChatGPT is never going to get tired. It will never think you're asking a dumb question. You can go backwards. It'll say, you can go back and forth in the level of complexity based on where you are, right? So it can be highly personalized for your specific situation rather than putting you in a group and you just have to follow along with the class with everybody else, right? And so there's a huge difference with that one. The second way that ChatGPT can help, not only in personalizing, is to come up with almost an infinite number of examples of a specific task or a specific question, right? If you and this is not a knock against tutorials or anything like that, right? Because they have their limitations, right? If you buy practice exams, you may get like 300 to 400 questions, and you can buy another set of them, or you go to a tutorial, you'll get like 10 questions and 15 questions and 20 questions. The nice thing about ChatGPT is that it can give you an infinite number of those in all kinds of variations. We'll actually show you some really interesting examples of how you can interactively work with ChatGPT to start somewhere and then iteratively build the complexity as you go along, but tailored for your situation. Okay.
One more thing before I ask you to do and show some capability of ChatGPT. I also saw and experimented with this paid version called personal instructions, and I saw people using it saying, what are my strengths and weaknesses, so that my responses from ChatGPT are highly personalized. For example, I'm preparing for a GMAT and I find a part of, quantitative reasoning a bit hard. So perhaps I can give my strengths and weaknesses as my personal answer that I find it that difficult. Do you think it also adds it to the personalization effect, what it is? And are there any
Absolutely.
different prompts people use like what you have used?
Absolutely. It's a great observation. So the nice thing about something like ChatGPT is that you can go up to it and say, look, I really have a problem with number theory. I actually have a problem with inequalities, fractions. That's a big problem for me, right? So can you help me understand better? Can you tailor some examples that I can build up my competency in this? One of the things that is really remarkable about the current state of the art ChatGPT LLM is that, and you will see this in the example when I start this, you can converse with it almost exactly like it was a human person on the other side, right? You can confess all your weaknesses. It won't laugh at you, right? You can tell it what your strengths are. It will capitalize on that one, right? You don't have to feel ashamed about it, right? You can say, I'm really bad at this one. Please help me. And you can adopt a tone that is very friendly with it. And it's also very friendly. So it makes a mistakes, it's just going to apologize. You also will say please and thank you. It sets a very interesting dynamic and a tone for you, right? It makes your learning session very pleasurable, okay?
Okay, so before I go to the quantitative reasoning, my last question before you start your task. GMAT, of course, today we will focus on GMAT and as a four sections. One is analytical writing assessment.
Mhm.
The big part between this AWA of GMAT and ChatGPT, the common thing is text, because they ask text para and analyze. ChatGPT is good at that. So my, very short answer from you, will it help the students in that section as well? Even though today we are not going to cover, but someday we will cover that. You are a very short answer on that, because both have common affinity towards text.
Yes. Is that short enough?
Yes.
Yes, it will
Okay.
help.
Right. Then there is an integrated reasoning. I'm
Mhm.
not sure whether the chatbots are matured to do this critical analysis. Do you think they are matured, or they are still a long way away from the critical reasoning where you remove the assumptions and do? Because it is predicting the word. So I'm not very sure, but your expert opinion on that.
Yeah, so I've tested a lot of conversations out of the critical reasoning part, and I have a two-part answer for you. One is yes, it's sort of a yes and no answer. There is still quite a bit of ways to go. But on the other hand, I've been pretty surprised in some instances of how well it can actually reason. So I actually use it for my research and I test certain research ideas. I almost engage with it in a Socratic dialogue, right? And when I do that, I'm actually frequently surprised and it says, oh, that's a very interesting technique you're trying. And I said, wow, it is able to detect that what I'm trying is something new and it's able to spot that. So I get goosebumps when I see text like that one. In some others, and I'll be happy to show at least a couple of really quick examples that it does fall down on some other types of reasoning exercises. But I'll tell you a way how you can get around that with ChatGPT.
Okay. And there is a third section called verbal reasoning, which is not a critical reasoning. And again, the common thing is those words. So
Exactly.
your expert opinion on that before I start the quants part.
Yeah. Even on the verbal reasoning also, ChatGPT can be extremely helpful. But again, both for verbal reasoning and mathematical quantitative reasoning and critical thinking, all of these areas, today I want everyone to take away the following big caveat. Big takeaway is this: you have to learn to interact with it, train with it, learn how to spot errors, and I'll show you how to do this, nicely. But once you do that, you start getting a better understanding of, how to deal with all this. Okay, that makes
Okay.
sense.
So without further ado, I think I will hand over to you for quantitative reasoning. What are the tasks? What are the one? Because that is the focus of today's discussion. But I just did a background work saying that the commonality between ChatGPT and this test, and there must be a common ground.
Yes, certainly, certainly. So let me get my things up here. So I am going to move some of these things around. I actually have multiple displays here. So if I look away this way and here, please don't mind me because I'm actually looking at screens, okay? So can everyone see the screen that I'm sharing right now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so when we start when we started this journey, right? The whole idea was, how can ChatGPT help with GMAT, GRE type of exams? And of course, ChatGPT being what it is, I said, well, let's ask ChatGPT itself how it can help me. And so I kind of used this, and I said, how should I use you, meaning you, ChatGPT, for GMAT and GRE type of exams? And it kind of gave me a very good overview of how it can deal with it. So, for example, in quantitative reasoning, it says, I can explain various math concepts. I can help you solve math problems. I can generate practice questions for you. I can help you understand how to read and interpret graphs, tables, and charts. The one caveat I have before I launch into this one, I need you to know that I'm actually using the ChatGPT version 4. Okay, so there are two versions of ChatGPT. One of them is a free 3.5. You can use that. I'll show you some examples of using that. And you can also use the version 4. The version 4 is a paid version. For my work, it's about $20 US dollars, per month. That may seem a little bit pricey for some folks, around the world. But for me, I thought that was a no-brainer. It saved so much time for me in various ways, which I can't even go into. I do it for programming, my research. I do a lot of stuff in planning. I kind of depend on it. So it's my personal assistant in many, many ways, right? It's amazing. So I use it a lot. I have no financial interest in ChatGPT, so I don't get anything if I'm saying, try it out. But for your own selfish interest, you might want to check it out, okay? Otherwise, you can still use the free version 3.5. Version 4 is much superior in its reasoning capabilities. And that's the reason why I like it. But you can continue to use 3.5. The one thing I'll also mention is that this field is rapidly evolving. Tomorrow we're going to see version 5 or version 6. You'll see Claude coming up. You'll see others, Bard coming up. So you cannot simply sit back and say, I will just ask somebody and we'll see what happens. You should also be experimenting and looking at stuff. So I'll show you some interesting things around that area also. All right, so let's dive into
Kiran,
some of the.
one point before you proceed. Regarding
Mhm.
the price, I saw very interesting things some of the students doing here as a study circle, and 5 of them buy one license and then do that. So there are many other innovations people are trying with that.
I don't know if I can call that an innovation, but the challenge with that, no, it's a good one, right? But the challenge with that one is that there's a quota. So within every 3 hours, there's a quota that you can use. So if you run out of quota using that same, that's please, I want to make sure we are not advocating that. That's not an ethical thing to do. So I mean, obviously, any GMAT GRE, I mean, one of the options you always have is to pay somebody else to go do it, right? But that's not. We would never suggest something like that. Okay. All right. Very good. So one of the things you can do is you can actually ask it all kinds of questions and say, hey, prepare a schedule for me. So here's an example. I'm going to go all the way up. Excuse me for 1 second. So you can actually ask it, and you have to prompt it in certain ways. So you have to set the scope. You have to say, you have to define the role. What is your role? So ChatGPT, you are going to be an instructor. I am a student. And the context is, I want to prepare myself for the GMAT. You have to type all this stuff in. The more information you give it, the better tailored is going to be the response for you. So, but I'm keeping it brief here. So I simply said, you're an instructor teaching me how to study for GMAT. Please structure a study schedule for me. And it said, certainly. So here is what you do. Understanding the format of GMAT, what types of questions will come up, the 3 or 4 major classes of questions. What foundational knowledge do you really need? Building skills, skill development, week 10. But you can do other things with it. Instead of simply saying it like this, you will also say, I only have 3 months to study. So within the 3 months, can you please build a schedule for me of how to do this, right? And it will conform to that one. Or you can say, I only have like 10 days to study for it. Hell. And then it'll say, well, how many hours you need to study on all these things, right? So you can give it all kinds of constraints to do that. So my strong recommendation is go ahead and engage with ChatGPT in a very dialogue kind of a way, and be prepared to challenge and say, hey, you're asking me to do this, but I don't have time to do all this stuff. So help me out here. It will restructure the whole thing for you. Okay. Another thing you can also do is to confess all your weaknesses to it. You can say, I'm really, really poor in mathematics, right? I need some foundational education, or I have a problem with language, with English skills, and what do I do, right? So it's going to help you structure your entire study session based on that, okay? So what I would like to do, though, is just to kind of get your juices flowing. I mean, this is a huge topic, and I'm sure we'll have other sessions dealing with various aspects of this. But what I would like to do is kind of zone in on the quantitative. Otherwise, we'll be here for the next 3 hours. Okay. So in the quantitative, so you can actually do this any number of ways you want. My suggestion is that go pick up a site would actually offer you free practice sessions or something like that, and it's perfectly fine to take something like that. So here's an example. Okay, this is a manhattanreview.com. I'm not endorsing it. We're not endorsing that. We're simply pointing it as an example. So you can feel free to go to that one. The only reason I went and looked at the site is only because if you look at any specific one, they will actually give you they will ask you a question, but they'll also give you the detailed answer of how you actually answer something like this, right? So if I submit an answer to this one, right, it'll give you a feedback. It'll tell you how many students got this piece right. And it also has an explanation. And I'll show you exactly how to use these explanations to train or customize your ChatGPT session. Okay, so let's dive into a few interesting ones. So if you look at the GMAT practice, you got the problem solving, quantitative reasoning, and you got data sufficiency piece. There are two pieces to this, right? Problem solving and data sufficiency. And you also have critical reasoning, verbal comprehension, sentence correction, and so on. But we won't deal with that for now. So let's take a look at some of these. When you start your ChatGPT session, I have a tip for you to make it very effective, okay? Let's assume that this is the site that you want to go into. You don't have to, you can go to another site also. It's perfectly fine. And they may classify these questions with a slightly different, code, if you like, right? Here it says GMAT, PSQ1, PSQ2, and so on. They may have slightly different codes, but whatever the code is, your preferred one, so you can actually structure it in such a way. So now, hopefully, you can see my ChatGPT window. One of the things I've done is I've actually literally labeled them as GMAT PSQ1, right? So if I go here, I can see GMAT PSQ1. So in this menu sidebar, you can easily figure out where you are, and you can keep going back to that session. Okay, so here's a tip for you. Every specific skill that you're focusing on, let's say word problems here, or DSQ1, DSQ5, each one of those open up a new ChatGPT session, okay? And when you do that, you will have the ability to go there and modify this, right? You can go here, for example. So if you take a look at this one is a GMAT CRQ3, okay? We won't deal with this one, but just to give you an example. So here is your CRQ3. And if you put it like this, it may not really, help you understand what's going on. So you might want to say, you know what, I'm going to rename this one so that I can actually track this. And I am going to call it this. And just for my personal sake, I'm just going to call it 4 because I'm using ChatGPT version 4. And I have some versions 3.5 because I wanted to show you guys how the differences are, right? So now I can easily go back and reference it and say, oh yeah, let me focus on this one. Otherwise, it's kind of tough to know where you are in this thing, right? ChatGPT requires a little bit of an improvement in its ability to organize all your queries and searches and everything else, right? So that's a bit of a challenge. But otherwise, past that, let's take a look at one of the quantitative things, right? So here's an example. And this one, by the way, is PSQ1. So if I look at PSQ1, which I think we just did this, it is basically asking you a very specific question. Now, I will not go and read out each and every question because we waste our time on this one, but take it on faith that this question is actually testing certain things such as percentages, ratios, okay? And once you go through that, now what you might want to do is attempt it yourself, okay? And see if you can figure it out. And whether you did correctly or wrongly, or you may say to save time, you can say, pick something by random and then hit submit. And you may get it wrong, but at least you get the explanation here pretty quickly. So what I've done is I've taken that very same thing, copied it, and I put it here, okay? When you do, I have a warning for you. Please be aware that ChatGPT when you paste stuff like this here, it does not do a good job of identifying the 3/8 fractions and some of the equations. So you have to go there and massage it a little bit carefully. When I first type this and put it in, I don't know if it'll do it again. No, we won't do it. What happens is that this 3/8 became 38. So I had to, that doesn't sound right. So I had to go and put the slash there. So it's an unfortunate formatting thing that ChatGPT has to fix, but it's there, okay? But once you do that and hit submit, it helps you, it kind of goes through this entire thing and tells you what to do with this, right? And the very same question, it's just by way of comparison of 3.5, just so you understand the capabilities between the two. If you go here and you do the same thing, let's see what it actually came up with, okay? So it actually came up with the wrong answer here, okay? So what you can do is, in such a case like this, you can actually go there and take this entire thing, okay? You can take this entire thing and then paste it here and say, you basically say, nope, that's a wrong answer. Here's the right answer for you. If you paste it and it tries to correct itself, okay? The So here is my tip for you to make this really effective, okay? Because unlike a tutor in a tutorial or professors, if you don't understand something, you can ask question right there, and if they're wrong, they will immediately correct themselves right there, okay? This facility, sometimes, ChatGPT will give you the wrong answer, not because, do not think of ChatGPT as an omniscient, a tutor that knows everything back and forth. We are not there yet. So the caution for you is paste it, compare it with the actual real answer that you got from this practice test. And that's the reason why you should start there, okay? So you start there where you know the answer, and then make sure that ChatGPT is giving you the right answer here and the right explanation. But once you're there, it's perfectly fine. So I went through a few of those simple examples like that. So I'll give you another one. Let's head back. Let's see if I can go back. How do I go back? Back to the overview. And let us take a look at one of the others. Let me show you one, which I think is number properties, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, yes, this is a classic. This is a very, very good example. And this one is PSQ9, which is right here. Okay. And one of the things you'll notice is that I have actually done this with the enabled plugins, the version 4, which is a superior version of doing that. Just give me 1 second and let me see if I can find my other version of this one. Here it is, I believe. Yes, so here is that very same question right here, and it gave me the wrong answer. So you can see it's the wrong answer right here. So this is the default 3.5, okay? And here's how I go about it. And I say that's incorrect, the n is 25. So let's look at the question for a second. A positive integer m divided by another positive integer n, the remainder obtained is m over n is 89.32. Well, the remainder is 8, and the actual fraction is 89.32. What is the value of n? Now, some of you may be totally baffled. You'd say, what? How do I even think about this one, right? I have no idea what to do with this. So one thing you could do is to take this entire question and put it up here, just like I did. Okay, here it is. And I just put it up here. And you just have to make sure it's m over n. It did not do that the first time, and we get into a lot of trouble with that. So you have to make sure. So once you do that and you come up with the answer and you say, well, I don't know if the answer is right. Let me check. And then you go back and say, well, there's no 4 here. What do I do? Well, I'm just going to mark something. Okay, I'm too lazy to figure it out myself. And it says you missed it. And it says the correct answer is, and you say, that's interesting. What happened? So you kind of go here and you look at the explanation. And if you understand it, that's great. But one of the things you can do then is to copy this entire thing, okay, just like so, okay, just to Control C, copy it, and go back here and paste it, right? And it now what I've done is I did not do that. I basically said that's incorrect. Here is the correct answer. And it kind of went through that and went through that, and it says, here it is. Now, the problem with this one, and I need you guys to be smart about interacting with any tools like this, ChatGPT, or in fact, even with instructors, right? I don't want you to take something and say, oh, I think I understand it, how to do this, right? So what you have to do is, when you look at this one, what it is doing is it is doing a trial and error. Let's try with 61. Let's try with 60. Let's try with 59, etc., etc. And it's trying to do all this. So I said, instead of the trial and error method, here is a correct method, which I got from here. This is a no trial and error. It's a classic closed form mathematical way to do this, right? So I go here, I paste it, and it says, well, you're absolutely right. And this is what's happening. And using the same example, please create 3 more examples. And I continue that one, right? And it made certain errors as we go through this one. So what I've done is I kind of switched over to the other version that I had, if I can find it now. I think it is this one, which I did with the enabled plugins. I should have mark this 4 so I can find it easily, right? So this one was able to do this pretty quickly. If I can, where is the original one? Yep, here it is. So it was able to find it, fairly quickly without doing a trial and error. The reason I'm kind of pointing you to all of this is that in ChatGPT, it's kind of tough to give you a cookbook and say, for these questions, do it exactly like this. You have to have a trial and error on spotting some of these things, right? And once you do that, you get now and it gave me a whole bunch of other details that I really didn't care about. It gave me a Wolfram graphs and stuff. I said, I don't care about that stuff, right? But what you can do is ask it to give more examples like that, right? So if you take this particular example and you kind of go all the way to the bottom, let me show you this. This one, so I'll tell you about this example a little bit later, but here's the one. So what I'm going to tell ChatGPT is something like this. Consider the problem we solved before. So you can adopt a very conversational tone with it, just like you talk to human beings. You can say, hey, remember that thing that you did before? And that's what I'm doing here, right? To consider the problem we solved before. Can you please give me another example of the same type? Wait for my answer and check it. Okay, so there. So let me go ahead and do that. So let's see what it does. Of course, let's create a similar problem. All right, so there it is. 72.45. So what is the value of Q? Let's see if you can do this one, right? Now, I won't let you all do this one. But if you kind of follow the pattern, it is 6 over 0.45, and you solve the particular one. And let's say, sorry, show me. Okay, and let's see what it'll show you. All right, let's solve the problem together. And you can see that the version 4 is a little bit slower because the amount of reasoning it has to do on the background is, sometimes rather intensive. So it's kind of giving you some information. And what you're going to see here, let me wait for this. So it's going to substitute all the values. Let's see where we go with that. I'm doing this live, so I don't know what it'll come up with. So let's see. Okay, that's good. That's exactly what I thought it would do. And now it is actually running a Wolfram Mathematica. So if you go with the version 4, you can actually install this plugin called the Wolfram Mathematica, and you can enable that, okay? So it can be expressed, so approximately 13.33, and so maybe not quite the thing that you wanted. So there are some things that you want to make sure that it does correctly, right? So here's a classic example where it sort of failed somewhat, okay? And the reason it failed is because you want both of them to be positive integers. I need you to find me an example where Q is a positive integer, right? And so this is a classic way that you have to fine tune what you are going to be asking it. So from this very brief example, I'm going to stop you for just a second and see if you have any specific questions before I give you one other example that shows you how to create increasingly complex questions.
There was a question from Vanshika Tomar. Are you live and you want to raise your hand if you are not satisfied with our panel member? Vanishka? No, I think she is Not there. Would you like to understand to what extent there can be automation in generative? That is okay. Okay, so Omar Shetty, if you are live, do you want to ask any question? Because your question was related to whether I will able to prepare. I am not an engineer. Omar, Omkar Shetty, are you there? You can raise your hand and then we can unmute you. No, he has put the question, but he is not there. I think those were the two. So you can continue with the next example.
Okay, all right. And I can answer that question also. I can come back. Do you want me to answer that question real
Yeah,
quick?
if you can take it, it's okay, because this I again viewed offline as well.
Okay. Omar's question, I believe, was about, I'm not an engineer, I have no background in this. How can I best use it, right? Excellent. So when you take this particular question and example, you have to prepare this, you have to learn this material if you ever want to do GMAT or GRE kind of things, right? So you have no choice. But how do you get about it? So if you look at this stuff and the whole thing is like completely incomprehensible to you, you can ask ChatGPT this particular question and say, I have very little background in math. What specific math skills do I need to understand this? And I'll show you how something like ChatGPT is going to be so helpful for you for exactly these kinds of things, right? So it says you do need to understand basic arithmetic, division concepts, understanding dividends, divisors, quotients, remainders, familiarity with this stuff, right? And so it's going to give you all these interesting ideas. And this particular question, if you go back for a second, and this is where you have to also participate in being an intelligent consumer of all this stuff, right? This is about a remainder, right? So now you can, it'll give you all these different things. And if, please, oops, sorry, I'm mistyping here. So please explain about remainders, okay? And you can ask it very specific questions and say, hey, how can I learn about remainders? And it is actually going to tell you very specifically how to. So the one important skill or the lesson that you can get from this is that not only do you focus on that specific question in that we just saw, right, the PS9 or whatever it is, you can take that and say, what are the specific skills I would need to understand that? And then go off and try to focus on that piece. Sometimes it is fractions, sometimes it is percentages, sometimes it is a little bit more advanced stuff, whatever that is. It gives you a way to go there and continue down that path and understand that a little bit thoroughly, and then come back again to these specific questions, right? I hope that helps. Okay, there's one other thing that I also want to show you. So just give me a second. Let me give you one other small tip if you wanted to organize all your material as you go through this process carefully. Let me just show you something. If you go all the way up, actually, it's right here. I'm sorry, it's right here. At the up top here, there's a share chat. So if you click on that, you can copy the link, okay? And you can save that link separately. So what I might do is I might actually have, let me just show you a very simple way that I kind of organize some of this stuff, okay? So I can put it up on a text editor, and I can do this, and I can say this chat is about quantitative reasoning, remainders, and PS9, whatever mnemonic that you want, you can put a descriptive text there and say, that's my chat, right? So, and now you can go there and open it up. So that way, here is another one that I saved to show you, or you can share it with other people, okay? If it doesn't actually match, okay, never mind. So I'm going to go back to this one. So here is a classic example. I want to walk you through this pretty quickly. And I won't do this in live mode because it can take time, okay? So take a look at this example. Again, quantitative reasoning. A certain company sells tea in loose leaf and bagged form in 5 flavors. Darjeeling Earl, you can read all that stuff. The company packages the tea in boxes that contain either 8 ounces of tea of the same flavor in the same form, or 8 ounces of tea of 4 different flavors in the same form. If the order in which the flavors are packed does not matter, how many different types of packages are possible? Well, that, unfortunately for you, it's a GMAT question. So if you're kind of struggling with that, you'll say, how do I solve this one? Well, you ask ChatGPT and it gives you a reasoning behind it, okay? And you might be stuck and say, explain this formula for picking 4 flavors out of 5, okay? And now it then tells you about the permutations and combinations, formulas, say binomial coefficients and things like that, okay? So, and gives you a very intuitive explanation of what those might be. And then you'll say, please create another question of the same type for my practice. Don't tell me the answer until I ask. Absolutely. So here's a question, right? And now you say, okay, and it says, take your time to solve and let me see. You'll say it's 20. Yes, you're correct. The answer is 20. And it explains why that is the correct one. And you'll say, fine. Now, this time, change the numbers, please. And it says, certainly. And here you have a different set of numbers. And again, you put down and you get all this stuff, right? But here is the interesting thing. You made a mistake here, and it starts saying, well done, the answer is 45. Here's the breakdown. And oops, it looks like we both made a mistake, okay? And the correct answer should be 52 and not 42. Would you like to go over the calculations again? So please watch out for something that looks like this. And then I said, well, this time create a question with different numbers. But now watch. With more than 2 forms of the product, what have I done here? I've taken 2 forms. Now I understand how to solve that. I have now taken 3. I have made it more complex. So here it gives you 3 forms of soap, bar, liquid, and foam. Okay. And it gives you, this practice questions. And now you can ask another form, another different numbers and forms, and you can go about doing this. And then it goes through all the calculations for you, okay? And it tells you that the correct answer should be 144, not 452. Okay, one more, please. And certainly, and you keep going, and it helps you understand where this is. Now, if you're stuck here, and you don't know what to do next, you can ask ChatGPT to help you out. You can say, now, what prompt should I use to make you teach me this type of solution? It's amazing, right? It actually tells you what you should ask it so you can get better at it. And now you can continue on, and it gives you examples of how you can actually prompt ChatGPT itself. And so here is an example that I gave it again. And I gave
Kiran,
yeah.
I think there is also a question related to this from Divya Sai, saying that how the prompts can help us to prepare for the GMAT exams. So maybe you want to take this point, what you are discussing, and spend some time. What kind of prompts can help for preparation?
Absolutely. The prompts are going to be of several types, and you really should experiment, with various prompts, right? So one of the things you can do is, let me give you a framework for your prompts, okay? Number one, you should explain to ChatGPT what your role, what you are trying to accomplish. What is your goal, okay? Or what you want ChatGPT to do. You have to set the context for it, okay? So to do it correctly, you should say, I'm a student. This is my background. I have good knowledge in math or not, as the case may be. And I'm preparing for the GMAT. I only have 3 months to prepare for it. You will be my instructor, and you will prepare a plan for me, and you'll guide me on how to prepare each and every segment, okay? And that's my goal. And or you can break it down even further and say, if you know nothing about GMAT, if you just stop right there, it's going to go give you a whole boatload of stuff. Here is a GMAT style, the categories of questions, and here is what you can do. It's a very big answer. Now you can zone in and say, okay, let us start with quantitative reasoning. I would like to assess myself and see how good I am in quantitative reasoning. Can you please provide me a diagnostic test on this, right? And you can ask the question, and lo voila, here it is. Can you please create a diagnostic test on GMAT quantitative reasoning and numerical ability so that I can assess my skills and what I need to focus on? And certainly, and it gives you a question. It explains that, and it says, please answer this, and I'll give you feedback. So you answer it, you give feedback, right? So that is a prompt style. Explain your role, ask for the task, and then tell what the goal is, and then tell it exactly the steps that you would prefer. For example, in some cases, when you are at a site like this one, you tell ChatGPT the following. You'll say, look, I'm a student and I want to learn. Let's focus on quantitative reasoning. Here is an example of a problem that I want you to help me understand and give me practice examples. And you cut and paste a question from that other site, stick it in there, and hit enter. And it comes up with an explanation. If it's right, it's great. Or you also provide this prepared explanation from here, and you paste it and say, this is the explanation that I got. Can you please follow this pattern? And you submit that, and then ChatGPT says, yep, I got it. That is a pattern that you want me to do. And then you say, great, can you please start with the simplest example of this particular type? And it will start there. And then you'll say, next 3 questions, can you give me the next level of difficulty? Just increase it, just like I did in my packages, T packages thing, right? So I kept increasing the style, the complexity of these as I kind of go forward, right? So I kept going up and up, and it started, increasing the difficulty. So simple examples, increasing level of difficulty, same pattern, learn to generalize. So these are some of the conversational prompts that you can use. So to kind of recap, I know I gave you a boatload of stuff, but to recap, the framework for a prompt is the following. Explain who you are, your background. Tell ChatGPT what role you want it to play. For example, in this particular case, it's the instructor role. There are many other use cases with ChatGPT where the role can change for chat. You can say to ChatGPT, I want you to assume this role, that you're a critique, and you will criticize or evaluate my essay, but that's a different role, right? So you have to train, you could tell it what role you want it to do, right? And once you do that, you explain the focus area that you are in, and you explain the steps that you want that both of you will take collaboratively, and then you will ask for it to generate some questions for you or ask it to generate a diagnostic for you, evaluate you. Based on that, can you please suggest for me a step-by-step lesson plan to start simple and increase the complexity of the questions until I can master this? Okay, and that way you can work with it. Okay, does that help?
Yeah, so I will take some questions. There is a question, I think from, it's not given, but how to use ChatGPT to retrieve most repetitive questions. I'm not sure whether you can do, but your expert opinion on
The short answer to that one is going to be sort of yes and no. ChatGPT's knowledge base at this moment in time is cut off on November something in 2021.
2021.
Right.
Yeah.
2021, right? So anything that happened after that, if there has been a substantial change in the way GMAT is done. Now, one thing you have to understand, people who do the GMAT and the GRE exams, the institutions, they're not sitting back and just being dumb about it, right? They do understand that people will use ChatGPT to train, and are they trying to find different ways around it, or are they saying, no, these still are very valid questions and maybe we'll make it a little bit more complex? I don't know. So anything that's happened after 2021, is out of bounds for the current implementation of ChatGPT, right? So you have to keep, so if they may release, I don't know, tomorrow they can release version 5, which has been trained all the way up to, August of 2023. I don't know. So, but based on that, you can, if you ask it and say, what are the most repetitive questions that I can expect? Actually, let us ask it, okay? I'm going to keep my, this one open here, and I'm going to ask, what are the most repetitive questions that come up on GMAT? Okay, I'm going to ask it a very general question. Let's see how it responds to this one. Okay. And remember, it is working with 2021 and pre-2021 data set that it has. Okay. And it may answer this, it may not. Let us see, here are some of the most repetitive ones. Data sufficiency, 2 pieces of information, some problem solving. And if I were you, I would look at this response and I would say, I don't think that's very helpful for me. I mean, I know there's going to be data sufficiency questions. So I'm going to ask drill a little bit deeper and say, for data sufficiency, what pattern of problems are most common in GMAT exam? Let us see if that'll help, okay? So by pattern, I mean the P over Q remainder, that's a pattern. 2 fractions doing something else, that's a different pattern. Figure out the odd and even numbers, that's another pattern, right? So I don't know what one is the most important pattern. But having said that, I'll let you, follow that as it types it out. And you can actually do exactly what I'm doing in your own ChatGPT version and see what you get out of that one. But hear me out on this important thing for a second. There are people out there who play the lottery by looking at past numbers and how they were picked at random, right? They'll say, the number 28 was picked so many different times and won the jackpot. I'm going to pick number 28, okay? Does it mean in the future that's generally going to be true, right? The problem with that type of thinking. So don't assume too much about repetitive questions. All you have to worry about are the repetitive patterns. That's the important part, right? And tomorrow they may change it up. Because as I told you, the people who manage these tests are not sitting back and in a vacuum. They also know that students will do this and they'll see all the patterns and they'll say, okay, wait, let us actually use ChatGPT to create our next GMAT exam, right? So that the patterns don't repeat from the before. They may use ChatGPT to do exactly that, okay? So you never know, right? So you got to be a little bit careful with, taking that approach.
There is one question from Nakshatrish. ChatGPT gives wrong solution for quants a lot of times. How do we tackle that? I think you answered that, but just a quick, recap of that.
Yeah, this is a great question, and thank you for asking. I cannot emphasize enough that you should never start a ChatGPT session cold and keep continuing pretending everything it is telling you is right. What you need to do is what I call, there's a term for it that scientists use. It's called calibration. You have to calibrate it with the right answer. So you need to have 5 or 10 questions of the particular type. Just like I showed you, you go to other sites, you go to practice exams where you know the answers. So you take that, put it in there and calibrate, make sure that ChatGPT's answers are matching the known correct answers, right? You always have to do this, by the way, okay? Whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or something else, always calibrate. Just so you know, scientists, especially from the physical sciences, when they look at instrumentation, they do this as a matter of practice. They always calibrate their instruments before they launch into any experiment, okay? And this is a very, very good technique that you should follow.
There is one more question I just wanted to know, since you are available on the webinar. Apart from ChatGPT, there are a number of large language models coming up. There are a number of announcements. And do you think a model like Claude, what is coming up, will it be useful, helpful? your broad view on this large language models evolutions and especially the competitive exam preparation. Because each one of them will offer a different value proposition. That is what my present thought process is. So your expert view.
Yeah, so here's an example of one of the same types of questions that I asked to Claude. Claude, by the way, is free so far until it gets bogged
So that's
down.
what I'm saying. Claude being free, have any
Yeah.
advantage over ChatGPT?
So let me answer the question by actually showing you some of these answers, right? So here's an example of the very same question that we saw before that I asked Claude, and it gave me the right answer, okay? And then I said, fine, please give me another question of the same type. Wait for my answer and check it. So then it gave me another one. And when I do this, and it said, okay, the answer is 6. Now, at this point, you have to sit back and say, is that really true? I did the math on this one, and I found out that the answer 6 has been rounded to an integer, which is not right. So I pointed out that error to it. I said, but Q is a positive integer, so its actual value is 6.024, so it rounded. So it said, you're absolutely right, my mistake is this, let me rework this. And it is not able to get out of that trap. It keeps giving you back the same thing, right? And here's another one it gave me, and it says value of, so it says 7 over 0 is 7, which is nonsense. And I actually said 7, it does not equal 7, my mistake, therefore it must be. So it's trying to correct itself. So the reason I kind of went down this path for you is to tell you that Claude right now is failing miserably, in my opinion, right at this minute. It could be good at some of the other things, and we have to test it continually because they're improving it continuously, right? So this is not a knock against Claude. I'm simply pointing out that if you always compare, so here's my strategy. What I did is I went to ChatGPT. I opened up ChatGPT one session, another tab. I opened up Claude, right? And I take questions from one and give it to the other one and see how it answers. I ask it to generate a question, Claude, and I put it back into ChatGPT and test. So I'm baking off. I'm making ChatGPT and Claude compete with each other, right? And if you go down that path a little bit, you will start to understand the strengths and limitations of each. So right at this minute, my advice has to be that ChatGPT version 4 is still the state of the art when it comes to this, with the caveat that you always start with a supervised calibration session before you continue down the path of using it for your GMAT preparation.
So we are now, almost 4 minutes over the time, but I have a last question for you. Because on the one extreme, there is this coaching classes for GMAT preparation. Other extreme, we have seen what ChatGPT can do. Do you think coaching classes will extinguish, or coaching classes plus ChatGPT will coexist, or coaching classes themselves will go transformative row? So between this continuum, what is your view, how it will evolve, and what is your advice to the students who are preparing for that? Of course, we will evolve this discussion as we move forward, but your concluding remarks on this continuum, how it will evolve.
Thank you. That's a great question. So I'll be very brief in the interest of time. So here's a very quick analogy for you. When massively open online courses came up, the MOOCs, right? Stanford, MIT, many other colleges, and Coursera, they all started putting, open. You can go to MIT and, sign up and you can get a free lesson on artificial intelligence, on LLMs, right? Have MIT, Stanford, all these other pioneers in MOOC courses, are they out of business? They're actually making even more money now, right? Their degrees are even more valuable, right? So, we as professors here, we have absolutely no problem. I direct my students to go online to YouTube and do some of these courses. It does not threaten me as a professor to continue. People still come back to me, right? Why? It's because we offer certain advantages. So here is my concluding remark on the tutorials for stuff like this one. Number one, it depends on the type of person you are. Me, for example, I'm a very effective and good motivated self-learner. Okay. I will go on and I will learn all kinds of stuff all by myself and have a lot of strategies to do it effectively myself, tested over the period of time. I've learned a bunch of stuff like this, right? I don't need to go to a class to do this stuff, okay? However, in many cases, I faced a problem. Then I said, okay, now maybe I need an instructor to help me out here a little bit. So, but there are other, some of you may say, you know what? I don't know all these different strategies for learning. I just need somebody to hold my hand from the beginning and feed me all the right answers and feed me the lessons, right? I want to be spoon fed. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just who you are. In that case, tutorials will continue to exist, right? My best concluding advice for you is the following. If you feel that you want a tutorial and you have the money to spend, be my guest, do it. But continue to use ChatGPT as an adjunct supplementary tool for this. On the other hand, you can come the other way. You can say, you know what? I'm going to start with ChatGPT. I'm very comfortable using it like the way you heard in this webinar today and continue to experiment with this one. But at some point, you'll come to some topic that you just can't seem to get ChatGPT or anything else to help you out with this one. In that case, you can have targeted session with a tutorial, with a professor, with a college somewhere and say, you know what, I just need help with this piece. I don't need the whole course. I just need help with this piece. Can you help me out, right? And you pay them, of course, right? So think about who you are and how you work and take it like this. So I don't think the tutorial colleges will go out of business. They will modify their approach. That's happening. In fact, some of the very good YouTube videos are actually put on how to use ChatGPT to prepare for this are actually put out by the tutorial colleges, by the way, right? So it's very interesting. But I actually, hopefully I offered you some tips that you probably may not have seen in other places, okay, if that helps.
Okay, one last opportunity to anybody who wants to raise the hand and ask the question to our esteemed panelist. Anybody wants to raise the hand? No, because we are already at almost 8:40 India time. So I would like to thank Professor Kiran for his wonderful insights and very enlightening conversation on that. We'll continue this conversation as we move forward, Professor Kiran. And I hope that you will keep enlightening our participants as we move forward with this evolution of large language models. I would like to thank participants because some of you have given the questions, some of you have joined. I would like all of you to know that we take your questions. Based on that, we try to craft a new webinar. So please put your suggestion, what you would like to see on our next webinar. We try to ensure that your needs are addressed using that. And not the last one, but not the least one, is thank you SPGMR Marketing and GMP team who have done wonderful job today bringing this webinar to our participants. So thank you and have a great evening and have a great day, Kiran at USA. Thank you. Thank you all.